G'day listeners and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Australia podcast, powered by Australian Property Scout Buyers Agency. I'm your host, Sammy Gordon, and today, guys, we've got a very interesting topic to unpack. I have in the studio with me the regular co-host, the big man himself, the silver dog, aka Gandalf, Big Jimmy Ibrahim. Mate, welcome back.
G'day, Sammy boy. G'day, listeners. Good to be back.
Mate, it is great to have you back. You and I, we've been having a bit of a chat. We've been having a chat offline with a good friend of ours as well, and talking a lot about something that everyone seems to ask us about. And I remember when I was younger, I used to think about it a lot. I've done a fair few of these myself as well. And yeah, man, people talk about this a lot, and that is developing. And right now, a lot of people are asking us, is this the right time to develop? Should I picking up sites? So I thought we would get in our resident building and construction expert, a man with over a decade in the game. He's developed a fair bit himself, and he and I have spoken many times about both of our deals and everything we went through. And I thought it'd be a good time to get him in, have a chat about this topic in particular. Mr. Liam Correy, mate, welcome back to the show.
It's good to be back.
Hey.
Good to see you, Liam. Good to see you. The listeners, as soon as they found out that you were the fittest, best-looking guy in your friendship group, said, when can we have Liam back?
His Instagram account doubled
He
instantly.
has doubled.
It went from 1 to 2.
He's thinking about starting an OnlyFans page, and here he is.
Here he is.
Well, thank you for having me back.
Nah, that's good, mate. It's good. How did the missus find the potty? What was the reception like? Did she rate it or did she think it was shit?
No, she thought it was good.
Oh, that's good.
Thought it was good.
That's good.
She gave you the thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
There we go. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, yeah, like I said before, guys, the whole reason I wanted to get Liam, he's got a lot of experience in this space, both personally and professionally within his career as well. And it's a question that we get asked a lot. I have ever since we started the business, and in the early days at APS, I actually helped a lot of clients with development projects as well. We do some smaller stuff, but when it comes into things like duplexes and sourcing land and doing builds and whatnot like that, and even going further into your townhouses and duplexes and subdivisions and all the rest of it, there's so many things to unpack and there's so many things to look at with it. And that's why I thought it'd be a great, opportunity, especially now that Big Liam's on board with us at APS as well. It'd be a great, opportunity to kind of jump in, dive into this thing and really unpack it. You boys ready?
Oh, absolutely. And I've always been fascinated about this whole developing thing, and I can't wait to pick Liam's brain because from a young age, anyone who talks about property always talks about, oh yeah, I can get 3 townhouses on it.
No, everyone thinks developing's where it's at. Like they all think it's the quick win in property.
And if you're not doing it,
it's the crypto in Resi.
Boy, there's your catch cry.
Bit of gold already.
That's a good title.
Bit of gold already.
That is a great title.
It's the crypto of property.
But everyone thinks from a very young age, if you're not developing property, you're not making any money.
Yeah.
And how wrong could you possibly be?
100%.
It is amazing.
That's why I want to pick this apart, have a good look through it. Actually give some examples even of clients that have brought kind of deals to me that they already had in their portfolio, and we ran their numbers because they were adamant they're going to develop it because they had the ability to do so. They had the cash, they had the site, and they'd made good money out of the market jumping. And then they actually looked at the numbers of developing, and it stacked to sell it. They were going to make more money selling it as is than going down that development route. And I think that's what I really wanted to, unpack, jump in here today with you boys. So let's get into it.
Sammy,
Jimmy, what's the first thing you want to know about this, mate? Where do you want to take this thing?
Well,
what do you want to know as a novice investor?
Yeah.
Never developed? What would you like to know about this?
I'm still developing. Well, the first thing I'd like to know is when you're looking at this as you're looking to buy a property.
Yeah. Before
you actually even buy a property, the decision within your mind to think, am I going for a development site or should I just go for a standard home? Like, what makes people want to buy a development in the first place? I think I'd like to just dispel the myth of developing is always your key to making wealth.
Yeah. I think the big thing to look at is the thing that always people are looking at. Exactly like you said before, I can fit 3 townhouses on this. Oh, you can put 10 units on this thing. And it's like, you've got to really understand the market in that area. You've also got to have a look at your own journey, where you're at within your own journey. Because everyone, like I said before, everyone thinks this is the quick win. And realistically, this is actually the quickest way to burn yourself and to lose money in property. I'm always a massive advocate of build a portfolio first and then use these as like debt reduction deals. We call them DRDs, right? Debt reduction deals down the track. Once you understand the game, they potentially can come in further down the line. But I think so many people, they want to do it so early on, and they can take themselves out of the game for years by trying to do things like this and literally burn themselves as well. So that's why I kind of want to dive into this, have a good chat with Liam, or even around FISO. So when people are really thinking about this as well, what are the things they should be taking into account, and what are the common mistakes and pitfalls, even around developing as well. And I think that's the big thing. People think it's, oh, well, you buy a place for this, I can build each one for this, and I can sell each one for this. And they think that's all that's involved, and they're not looking at everything else.
I know Liam's going to unpack a lot of the details on this, but back to you, Sammy boy. So if someone's listening out there and they're contemplating developing,
yes,
is there a certain limit or a certain time frame or a certain goal that you've achieved in your portfolio that you could even consider developing? Like, is there, you should have at least 3 properties or 5 properties or?
Everyone's different. I think the big thing to look at for a lot of people is where are they at, like personally in their journey. I think you've always got to cut your teeth on some standard resi. I'd be doing standard resi deals, like standard bread and butters. I'd be doing renovation deals, and I would be doing maybe some manufactured cash for deals. Either punching some unit blocks, whether you strata title them, community title them, renovate them, going down maybe some granny flat routes. Literally cut your teeth on. This is like, in my opinion, like your entry level developments before you go to your duplexes and before you go to your other things, because a lot of the time with that as well, you're still pulling an income. Like it's got a little bit of a fail safe about it if you've bought them and you've executed a bread and butter in the right way. And I think where a lot of people go wrong, they go straight to the development. They don't understand it. They don't understand the holding costs, everything else that's involved with it. And they can burn themselves really quickly. So like, cutting your teeth initially on deals like that, whether it's, you're asking about 3, 5, 10, literally everyone's different because everyone's income and the amount of capital they got to work with is different as well. But as an absolute minimum, I'll be starting with a standard bread and butter. I'll be starting with then a reno probably after that, and then probably your reno and granny as an absolute minimum to cut your teeth on the way it all works. Understand the building game, understanding the holding periods and everything that's involved with it. There's a lot of things to move through with it. And even the current, this is what I think a big reason I want to bring Liam in as well, is like a huge part of this is build timeframes and approval timeframes these days compared to what they were even 3-4 years ago, especially like pre-COVID. Those have absolutely changed like completely. You used to be able to build, I've built like 250 square meter, 4 bedroom, 2 bath, theaters, all the rest of sort of stuff. I've built those style of homes, those Specky sort of style homes before in 15 weeks.
Wow, that's bloody fast.
It is fast, but that's pre-COVID. There were builders that were doing it, especially Specky builders. They're pumping out good volume of that sort of product. You could smash deals out like that. But Liam, man, I'd love to unpack. Obviously in your previous journeys and what you've done, you've worked with Specky builders, you've worked with high-end builders. What were you seeing pre-COVID compared to what you're seeing, prior to coming and working with us, even in the past 2-3 years, the change in the game from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the game's changed massively. The time to do pre-construction has blown out massively.
Talk us through pre-construction. Most people who's never built, they don't understand pre-construction.
Well, pre-construction, like when you're building, you've got 2 avenues really. You got to start with the pre-construction, which is leading everything up to pre-approvals, getting ready to build, and then the file gets handed to construction, which is the actual build of the project. So you've got pre-construction, timeframes have blown out a lot.
Are you including DA approvals and everything in pre-construction?
Yeah, that's part of everything.
So it's basically design, permits, planning, getting everything ready to actually...
Before it literally gets handed back to the construction team to knock this thing over.
That's right, yeah. And look, especially as part of the pre-construction, councils have taken a lot longer nowadays. Ever since COVID, they changed the way that they operated as well. So very few people actually in council chambers these days, they're physically doing the work. That was always the case. Now you go to talk to council and you want to get some information. It's near impossible to do that these days, but their times to approve, they've put in these really complex systems. Soon as you have an issue, it goes back into the queue and you have to start all over again. Right. So the way that everything is approved these days is quite problematic. And now at the back end, because there has been a major shift in terms of build volume coming in, this is the time where you'll start seeing builders effectively letting go of various staff. And when that starts to happen, you have less people in the team doing jobs, that's when time frames start to
just
blow
really
out.
start blowing out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a crazy thing because like I was even talking about the Specky style side of things before. Man, even that, like I used to literally same builder. I built with the same builder probably 2 years pre-COVID, and I did a house in, it was literally 14, 15 weeks, and then when I was 21, I built my next house with this same builder, and I think it was a 6-7 month build. Same builder, everything else was promised the same. Big Specky builds, you can't get liquidated damages, which is where you essentially they pay you if they go past the mandatory weeks or like what they've promised to essentially build in. Specky builds, you can't get that in there. So it's literally like no recourse to get them back on it as well. So it's just nuts to kind of see. That's just build time frames, let alone, and you think about people who don't have that size of teams and volume and literally in-house. Imagine having it all subbies and they're all stacked to the roof. There's just no control around that, and that's what's crazy. I want to ask you for a sec. Why do you think? Why has it changed so much within counselling, getting approvals like that compared to what it used to be?
It's just the systems that they've operated now. As I said, COVID changed the way I think a lot of businesses in general operate. Council's no different.
Council is a business. People got to remember, council is a business. They're there to make money.
Well, they're a big money making business. So, look,
guaranteed revenue from your
yes,
right. Good. What
I need
a
to buy
business.
one of those. I need to get in there.
No, look, it can be really difficult.
Letting a lot of staff off go and whatnot during COVID, and not kind of replenishing staff levels.
Not bringing in enough staff, especially like with the bottleneck still from home builder grants and things like that.
So kind of let staff go because things fell away for 6 months, and then all these grants came in, which ramped everything to the roof, and then not replenishing that staff. So that's a huge bottleneck that's kind of coming through there. Yeah,
I think in general as well, it's communication. Like work from home has become a very real thing for a lot of council workers as well, and it just disconnects the whole communication piece. Trying to make things flow. It's all automated and online systems now, and some things that could otherwise be rectified if there was a person on the other end trying to chase it down, it just doesn't happen anymore. File gets rejected, put back into the queue. If you're waiting for approvals, like resi's not too bad, but even with standard residential, you can have periods in councils of up to 6 months. Talking about duplex, could literally be 12 months before you even get an approval.
I've had clients on the books that have come over and they've bought something else from someone else, whatever, and they've gone to try and get approvals, and it's taken them 18 months to get their DA. They finally get their DA, and their build cost has gone up like 50%, 30-50%.
Is the approval process, if you're just building a house, for example, compared to doing a duplex within council, are the timeframes different in terms of getting the permits approved?
Yeah, there's a lot more to look at with duplexes, more issues that the councils want to overlook. There are faster avenues. You can go beyond council in various states that have certification.
Private certifiers
that can do it, but
that's nowhere near as easy as it used to be.
It's not.
Because you can even used to go that for grannies and stuff, and man, the game's changed with that. Like, it's just nowhere near as easy as it used to be. Because everyone's gone for their money grabs. So to go through anything, because a lot of the time now the council infrastructure charge is so heavy on even grannies and duplexes and whatnot. They want to have a piece of that pie. So they're making the complying development sort of stuff so hard now that you do have to submit through that.
Yeah. Which is the bureaucracy of councils has always been challenging, and any small business will tell you that you try and get something through, just the backlog of stuff. And that's before COVID. And as you said, rightfully so, no one's actually in the office. My partner works for a local government, they're not there half the time. Yeah. So post-COVID, you've got even more challenges. There's even more bureaucracy. There's even more of a cash grab. So when you're contemplating this, the bottlenecks and the challenges that you're going to have to overcome before you've actually even dug any soil, you're already stacked
against you.
Yeah.
100%. Okay, so we've confirmed and we've verified that pre-construction. What do you call it? Pre-construction.
Pre-construction.
So pre-construction is blown out massively. Used to be reasonably quick. Now it's huge.
Yeah, there's so many other things. I mean, going into the period that we're in right now, I would expect that pre-construction time to probably blow out a little bit more, just because builders will start to let go staff.
Yeah.
This is the time period where we start to enter retrenchment because the volume of builds aren't coming in. So when a team used to have maybe 3 estimators and 3 drafty, they maybe only need 1 or 2 of those. And that makes sense from a cost perspective, but you've got maybe this, not too much less volume coming through, and it's all getting piled on
to much smaller teams.
Just on that, Liam, just for the listeners, explain why are they letting people go? Just
This is how builders operate. So obviously when times are good and you've got a lot more build demand coming in,
Scale up.
you can afford to have more staff and you need it there because the volume's there. But when the shift starts to come in and you've got that lack of volume coming through, all of a sudden you don't need the same number of staff there, and it affects the entire business.
And I think it's the really important thing with this, and this is we'll jump into this in a second with the actual construction phase, but it's like, even if they got everything through from the prelim stage at the moment and pushed out the pre-construction component, the construction piece has blown out so long, and there's such a labor shortage and material shortage. Like, even if they had the team of say 3 and 3, and now they're down to 1 and 1 of getting this all through, the team isn't there on the back end to finish anymore because there's such a labor shortage. The actual completion, the execution team isn't there to be able to finish it. So if they have all these jobs come off, and approved, and then go straight out into construction, your blowout times would be massive. The important thing on this is they don't want that to happen. Now, I'm sure Liam will dive into this in a second, because if that happens and they get to that point and they've signed off on it and it's approved by the bank and then ready to go, and that's the delay period. If you have build price increases, you can't push them on once they get to that point. Build price increases can only come in when they get the fixed price before it's formally approved at the back end and then pushed to construction. So it's almost like smarter to have the smaller team there up front to load everything up there, to take ages there, and then have a team that can execute a little bit faster on the back end, because they can kind of, the longer it takes there, the longer it takes to, and they can push those build price increases through and then execute faster on the back end. Because if they do it the other way, that's how builders go under. If they push everything through fast and then can't execute, and the build price and everything goes up, but it takes 2-3 times as long to actually finish the build, but all their cost increases are going up on the way through. The labor's going up, the materials are going up, everything's going up. By the time they get to the end of builds, they're losing significant money on these things. I think we were talking about this, last time when you were on as well, and we chatted about it with Lukey. There's literally been builders that have paid guys to exit contracts rather than actually do their build, because it gets too hectic. So it's kind of like slowing down that early initial pre-construction phase is almost like what they're doing at the moment. To keep themselves from going under.
So they're getting you on the hook so that you're keen to do it, but they don't want to commit as much.
And by the time you get to that point, you've paid deposits and you've moved along the line. And then if you go and try and jump to another builder who might have only been a tiny bit dearer, you go try and they've had their increases as well, but also you're so far down the line with them. As pissed off as you are, 9 out of 10 people, they're still going to push on unless they can't afford it.
And it depends. A lot of builders, and I've had a massive issue with this. I don't think they do it in an ethical way, but they'll do the approvals, get everything done, and then at the last leg, when people are jumping, thinking, I'm going to start construction, that's when they slap you with the big fee just before you go to construction. Even to get out, you're probably negative money. It would actually cost you money. You'd have to pay the builder because if you've lodged for all your approvals and everything,
they've spent more than your
deposit costs,
and they can come back to you for the other stuff.
It's like, cool, you can leave, but we'll take your 5% deposit.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how do you mitigate that? Like, is there any way there's no recourse because they're not giving you the full details until last minute?
Why we are having a podcast about should you be developing in this market, because this is the beast that we're dealing with at the moment. And really almost all builders in this game right now, it's almost the same for everyone, because they're in this, they're kind of all in this thing together. No one's got it so much easier than everyone else, because everyone's still at the exposure of material price increase, and they're at the exposure of these trade price increases as well.
Now for you two, are we talking big builders as well as small?
Everything.
Yes. So we're talking anyone in the industry in construction.
Yes,
okay,
100%.
Good.
You're probably more exposed the more, like the bigger things you're doing as well, especially when you're talking townhouses, duplexes, bigger builds, all that sort of stuff. Probably a little bit more exposed in it because it's a longer lead time before you get in.
Bigger
especially
blowouts, bigger delays.
100%. And that pre-construction takes a lot longer because the DA through council is a much more significant thing.
So what I'm thinking in my head, this is delaying the whole process, right? We've already bought this block or this house. So our holding costs are blowing out here. Do you find, Liam, that a lot of people really don't understand the holding cost? Like when they do their feasibility or they do their analysis, they're thinking, I bought it for this, it's going to cost me this, I'm going to sell it for this, done.
Yeah, everyone just looks at what they paid compared to obviously what they're able to sell for, but they're not factoring in so much of the other stuff. Even with general build costs, you've got to factor in all of the landscaping. You buy an established house, for the most part, it's got everything there. You're building, you've got to do the driveways, you've got to do the fencing, the turfing, the garden retaining, everything. And yeah, most people won't factor that in because it's not often within the build contract that they're getting all that stuff done. So you factor in those extra costs, even contributions. If you're going down the path of granny flats, duplexes and other developments, contributions can be massive, tens of thousands of dollars.
You mean for the council?
For the council contributions, yep. Which again, most people won't build into it. And then the final leg is obviously like the interest they're paying on the loans. You know, like land interest, you can't do anything with it. You're just paying that every time you're getting delayed.
Especially once you demo a house. And I know we're about to go into obviously the actual construction phase of it as well. But like once you actually demo the house, if that build blows out by a significant time frame, you don't have liquidated damages in there, which for the most part, it's extremely hard to get into contracts these days. It's just pure exposure. So you may have had 6-12 months before you've even started building. And then if your build construction blows out, let's jump on that for a second. I'm like, man, it was kind of like I said before, like we when I was doing some builds, I got a lot of my stuff done in 15 to 20 weeks was an average for what I used to build in, which is quite fast. I used to build grannies in 8 to 10 weeks. That's how fast I used to get them. Even grannies these days can take 5-6 months, longer in some
Probably
states.
more.
Yeah, it depends where you are and who the builder is and what they're building. If they're building lightweight materials, like your cladding and steel frames and all the rest of it. But if they're bricking on slab, a lot of the time in even grannies these days, you can be looking at like 8 to 10 months for a granny build if brick on slab with truss roof and all the rest of it as well. Because it is essentially these days the same time frame as a building a house. But man, talk us through what you've witnessed and experienced. The one saving grace we have with what we do and internally with APS and what a lot of clients experience is they kind of experience the same as what I do. So if there's anything blowing out, I'm always putting the firm hand on it because everyone's using the same build as I am. But let's say like outside, looking at the outside piece, I know obviously builders you've worked with so far, but everything even that you're experiencing in the industry, say pre-COVID, the average build times are say 20 to 26 weeks, right? Like 5 to 6 months. What have you been experiencing in the last couple of years? Like what has that turned into?
Yeah, it's probably double, close to double. For some builders, it's worse.
So you're talking 12 plus months to build a standard house, resi house.
In some cases, yeah.
Right.
Obviously, people aren't being told that information up front, but very easily. Yeah. I think there's been a little bit of reprieve coming in from material sides and from trade sides, and you'll start to see that come back a little bit more as the volume of building starts to decrease. But that'll be riddled with new problems and issues along the way. But yeah, I was seeing, 12 months at least for double stories going into 18 months. Single stories were getting hard to complete within that 10 to 12 month period. Yeah, big time blowouts.
I saw clients with other deals like I'd mentioned before. They were coming through, and some builders were being dead honest with them and going like, all these price increases can come through, and they're like, by the way, we can no longer honor like a 6 to 8 month build. We're probably looking at 12 to 18 months now because we're just spread thin with contractors with what we have available, and because of material shortage, that's realistically what you're looking at is a 12 to 18 month build time on a duplex, let alone say apartments, townhouses, anything like that. So I think like the big thing here, and I think we're going to jump into feasibilities in a second, right? Just running basic feasos and whatnot as well. But I think the huge thing where people, if we talk about feasos and leading into that, you can't go on best case scenario. It's kind of, the old saying of like, prepare for the worst, expect the best, or whatever the hell they're saying, something like that. It's kind of like in developing, you have to work on that. And a lot of people like to go on, I'm going to forecast numbers. I think I believe the growth is going to be, we're going to get 20% growth in the next 12 to 18. Never, ever, ever develop on proposed value. You should be banking on what it is worth today. Even if a market's increasing, great. If it's decreasing, you should be factoring that in. If it's increasing, but don't factor that into your numbers. That's just cream on the cake. Don't be silly and think, I'm anticipating 30% growth in the next 18 months or 20% growth. So there'll be an extra 80 grand, 100 grand each deal. That's cream, look at that as cream. You got to base it on what those numbers are today and be extremely realistic about it. And the other huge one is that holding cost during that period. And even when you're running the feaso, don't run the feaso on what you think you can build it at today, because you're not going to start building today. Run it on like where even ask the builder. You can even ask the builder, how much has your build prices increased in the last 12 months? Because that's what I'm looking at, or the last 6 and 12 months, so I can forecast my worst case scenario before we actually go to construction phase and where this is going to come in at. Because that can be a huge game changer and a huge, we're still going through heavy inflation. And heavy inflation is impacted by this as well. So something, people have got to really factor that into the equation if they're going to be going down this route. And it's funny, I didn't really do this poddy thinking we'd go down these avenues, but it's funny now we go here. It's kind of like it's walking through what people should expect if they're going to develop at the moment, and making people really aware of whether it's the right course of action or not right now.
Can I just say for you two, just to set the framework for people listening, when we go through this construction and so forth, we've got possibly two different camps listening. People that are looking to invest and develop as investors, and people as their primary place of residence or so forth. Can you just give us a little bit of context in advance of us talking about this for the two different camps and what they should be thinking about what we're discussing?
In what way? In particular?
For investors, right?
Because primary residence is a different game because it's an emotional play. It's a personal decision. It's an emotional play. I think sometimes you have to weigh into the equation whether if it's 100% what you're wanting to do. The timing of it doesn't really matter. It is what it is. And I've always been okay with that with people with primary residence because it's an emotional play. If it's a lifestyle decision, all the rest of it, it's okay. But when it comes to investing, it's a very different kettle of fish.
Okay.
I would just say, if you are looking to do something for primary purpose, now probably isn't the right time for it. If you're renting, you got a family, they're going to be put out. Could be periods indefinitely where they're going to be put out. You are exposing yourself to increased costs. It's just not a good time to be looking at it. There are shifts in general with a whole bunch of other stuff happening right now as well. We're looking at legislative changes in terms of energy costs. As builders are starting to get to 7-star ratings, they're unknown costs that people are probably going to be experiencing over the next 6 to 12 months as well. We're talking big costs, which could be another 15, 30,000 on top of the build price. If you wanted to do it, if it's a primary place, it's emotional, you can. But I would be
be holding off if you could.
Is it worth putting yourself and your family through at this time?
Just hitting that on the head though, for someone possibly thinking, well, if building prices or costs are going up, are they ever going to come back? If I don't do it now, I know I'm going to get. It's quite challenging, but if I wait 12 months, is it going to be even worse? It's hard to speculate. What do you think? On this?
Building prices never come down.
Never come down.
They never come down.
Never.
People always say, I'm going to wait for your build price to come down. They never come down. I've been doing this for 15 years
Who would
now.
give up an increase? It's hard enough to get price.
Exactly.
The problem is
they set the precedence, right?
Yeah.
A precedence is set. Once a precedence is set and everyone has set it, no one's going back. Because the builders, everyone thinks, they've put their prices up so much, they must be making so much. Most of them are just trying to keep their heads above water at the moment because you got to remember, someone signs a contract for a build 12 months ago or 6 months ago, and then it finally starts and goes through that process. And yes, people are like, well, that's the builder's fault. Not always. But when it happens, if there's been a significant increase in that time, by the time they get to it, they may have had a 50K margin in a deal. And now all of a sudden they're down to 10, 20K. They're barely making anything on the build. Sometimes, especially in that super hectic price increase period, probably of about 21, I reckon most builders would have barely made anything on builds unless they'd had real juicy comms in there, real juicy margins. I reckon a lot of them wouldn't have made anything. They don't come back.
But in saying that then, if you are, and just, we're going to go into investors a bit, would you then build? If you're doing it at your primary place of residence, knowing that building prices aren't going to come down?
I think you just have to assess your situation. Okay. See, this is for me personally. If someone was like, I'm definitely going to do it, I 100% want to do it. If it was me, I probably would do it. I hear what Liam's saying because it is going to be a headache. Fuck, mate, a primary residence build of that sort of magnitude, it's always a headache anyway. It's not a clean, easy thing.
Look, it is, but there's issues the industry's never faced before. You've got to be confident that the builder you're building with today is going to be there tomorrow.
Yeah,
I guess
that's a big
probably
one.
That's a great point. That is a great point.
It's just.
Especially because a lot of your smaller builders, they're the ones that they start to topple a little, So it's a great point.
Most people don't know the full volume and scale of builders that have gone under. Media only comments on a few of the larger, bigger name builders. There's been so many smaller, medium-sized builders that don't make the media cut, but they've been going belly under month on month on month. So you got to really be sure that you can have confidence in the builder. That's probably the biggest reason why I would say, is it worth it? It's all the other stuff, the unknown stuff. But
I think you're right in the sense of if you could put it off for 12 months and it wasn't going to be a game changer, I don't think there would be an issue with 12 months.
I think 12 months will be a lot more stability in the industry.
Even from an interest rate and inflationary perspective, I think a lot will sort of plateau in that sort of time frame as well.
Well, we're talking about risk, right? So if you're risking a higher price or cost, that's the better of losing all your money because the builder's gone bust.
Yeah, potentially.
So I hear what you're saying. If you don't have to, okay. So that's for the primary place of residence. For investors, let's tackle into we're going through the construction costs, right? Process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the big thing we'll kind of talk about before, and we did unpack this quickly, was essentially around the construction timeframes, just going crazy. Massive shortage of labor, massive shortage of materials. Even now, it hasn't gone back to. It will start. I think it will start catching up because build prices are so high at the moment, and interest rates have gone up so much as well. It's kind of pulled back a little in terms of people being able to actually complete projects. So a lot of people, we spoke about this, I don't know, not that long ago, was about people when they get their primary residence or when they're going for their primary residence, they're kind of almost always going for their ceiling of what they can afford. A lot of people might have gone and bought land and then build prices have also increased at the same time that prices may have actually come off, like actual end sales cost prices might have come off. If that's happened, so they paid, just to explain that as well, I might have gone too quick. Bought the price, build is one thing, that's now gone up, but sales price in the area, back end finished prices may have actually come back because a lot of areas have come back in the last 12 months, just due to especially interest rate increases and whatnot as well. If that no longer marries up, they may not actually have the funds or the serviceability to complete that build. It's a lot of people kind of, not being able to finish jobs anymore. I think that will help the situation, but we're still in a massive shortage and massive deficit, even in terms of housing. When you look at the populations coming in, so that's another story entirely. But yeah, it's only going to keep sort of increasing at the moment and causing some issues on that front.
Yeah, and that's again part of that risk is build prices still going up. Potentially, there could be some private sellers that bought land can no longer get serviceability because they bought land 12 months ago. They've had 12, 13 interest increases. They've tapped out. They can't build anymore. They're selling once they've settled at sometimes less than the price the developers are selling the land for. That's going to be an issue. If the banks start seeing that other blocks have sold for 30, 50K less than your one, and you're still going to try to go down the process, you've had build cost increase, you've got land decreased. It can be a hard recipe to try to get right in terms of actually affording. Something I was going to mention before, just when we were talking about building prices and not coming down, people have to understand, like, builders are not a single entity, right? The builder is throwing the margin on top of hundreds of suppliers that are giving them the pricing. That's why building prices can't really reverse. You would need every single supplier pretty much to say, well, we're going to drop our prices 10, 15, 20%, and then the builder could afford to lower the cost of build. Builders can't lower their margin because it's often they're
run skinny anyway.
Yeah, by the time they've ran all their costs on running their whole operation, there's not that much profit in it in general. There might be 20, 30% margin, but their overheads and full costings and everything else could be 15 or 20% before they're making that little bit of extra on top as pure profit. So they can't really drop it down, and I doubt suppliers are going to be dropping prices left, right, and center.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. He's giving a nice round way of describing why it is not going to happen.
Yes.
All right. Well, it's been great chatting, everyone. Get on with your day. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Look, I think the one thing, let's drill back for 1 second in terms of feasibilities. Let's just dive real quick into that. And let me know if I've missed anything here on this end. When you're going in, you're doing a feasibility. Let's talk about full feasos on a deal, right? You're looking at actual entry cost and what it costs to buy something. If you're buying something as just land, that's one thing, right? But if you're buying something with a house on it, you got to factor in your demolition costs. You got holding costs. You got infrastructure charges. Everyone loves to miss them, especially if they've never developed before. You don't know what they are. You need to find out what your Section 94s are, whatever they are in your council, in your state. You need to figure out what they are and be accurate with it. You got to be accurate with your holding cost timeframes. It's the other massive thing that people forget about. Let's say it's a development site. You might have a terrible rent for a period of time because most times an old shit is sitting on it. So you might have a terrible rent. Then how long are you actually holding it with no income for when that goes down? And that cost increase when the construction starts and your repayments start going in as well. You got all those things. You got your actual cost of your build. You've got your cost of your landscaping and the finish and the fit out, the finish off of the build. So everything, all components to do with the build and actually getting it to that point as well. And then obviously when you sell, your sales costs, which a lot of people love also to omit from the pricing. And the way I would do it is you are never guaranteed a certain price. You should have a low price, you have a high price. You have your worst case, you have your best case scenario. If you factor everything in, and I would be factoring some sort of build price increase in that period as well.
You have to, yeah.
And depending on the development would depend on how much of an increase, because if we're talking a Specky build and we're maybe we could get it super quickly approved through, other avenues not going through council, you're still probably 3 months away. If you have to go through council, you're probably 6 or so. I'll be factoring in a certain amount for that. But if you're talking duplexes, townhouses, apartments, all that sort of thing, and you're talking 12 to 24 months, it's almost like an unforecastable increase. It's very, very hard to figure out exactly where that's going to land in that time frame. But let's say you work out your absolute best on it, work out your margins on worst case and best case of all those situations. And at worst case, if you can still make the money you think you can, then it's a deal. But yeah, I think there's just so many people run on skinny margins when they're doing smaller developments. They run on 10, 15%. I hate skinny margins like that because they can get eaten out so quickly. Even something could pop up with a build like a slab or a soil classification that you don't foresee could wipe out 20, 30K. Now you're down to 5% margin or whatever. All of a sudden, all your margins start getting skinnier and skinnier. If you're running on skinny margins, I actually remember people talking to me about 8 to 10% margins back in the day. I was like, holy shit, I couldn't sleep at night if I was doing a development at 8 to 10%.
It's ridiculous.
There's just no fat. There's no room. There's no room for error.
And that's a gross margin, right? You haven't
gross
paid
margin.
any tax on
no
that.
Tax. No tax.
There's various things that you can't, unless you know yourself, like you might have neighbor notification issues where one of the neighbors around you has a problem. Maybe they just don't like the development in general. They put an issue into council. Council delays the approval while they're checking in on the merits of the build. You've got easement issues. If someone has an easement in their block that you've got to tap into, they may not give you access.
Yeah, if you don't get it right, you're done.
You're screwed.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's ways around it. It means you got to put a little bit of money up to compensate the other person.
Well, let's unpack that for 1 second. Let's say you were planning on tapping in the sewer of the dude in the back and he goes, no, you don't have access to my block. And then you need to put in a pump out system at the back that pumps. Shit doesn't flow uphill.
If council will approve it.
If they'll approve it, if it's the right council, they approve it. But let's say even if they do and you have to go through and it's another DA for a different cost and a different improvement, and then you need to put that in, depending on size of development, it's going to depend on the cost. Then you have to factor that cost into it. Sometimes it's cheaper just to pay old mate across the fence to let you go through. But these are all things that are unforeseen. That's why you can't run on skinny margins. So your margins have to be fat.
Yeah, what margin would you say as a bare minimum?
For me personally, it's always been 20% minimum. Most of my developments were 30% plus.
And 20% on very conservative numbers, right?
Conservative
not the
numbers.
best case scenario.
Yes. That's why it's not the right time to develop in this market. It's too hard to get them. Stock is also so tight. It's extremely hard to get great discounts on deals. The other big thing is like people wanting to develop in a market like Sydney at the moment. That's in a bit of a weird flux situation at the moment. It's hard to call whether she's going to plateau, she's going to keep coming back a little bit, she's going to increase a little bit. Like it's too hard to call because people have been saying, oh, well, if it's coming back a bit, I'll buy a development site now. It's like, mate, wait till the actual bottoms come in and we know 100% it's there. And if it's not, you don't buy on something that's not a certainty, that's not as close to certainty as you can. And doing 10, 15% or less, like you just got to be out of your mind.
Can you touch on, just quickly,
No, I can't touch it.
So there's the investor who's going to do a development, right? And people might think, well, there's still people doing these things. There's still people doing townhouses and builders.
How long they've been doing it for?
Who knows? But what I'm more angling at is there a large portion of tradesmen or tradespeople that do their own projects and their margin is essentially paying them a wage to stay in business? Because if they didn't do it, they wouldn't have any money. So they're like, okay, well, if I can at least make 50, 100 grand out of this, that is my salary, and I'll just do the project.
So often with your small deals, you're competing with the small builders because they can make like their margins are kind of built into the deal plus a profit on top. You got to realize for them to do 10%, it's actually probably 20, 25% margin. So for them, if they're just looking for a deal, they just need to do a deal. They're going to buy something with it. They probably buy something with 10 because they can stretch it 20, 30% plus because
they're doing all the work.
Yeah, they got all the margins built in and everything as well. And they're their own client. So it's a much easier process. You got to remember when you're doing small stuff, you're competing competing with those guys.
That's an important point, right? Because people
100%.
don't realize that. They don't realize these people are doing that. That's how they make their money.
Yeah, man, 100%. So, and a lot of them will have a side project or two on the go at any one time. A lot of builders, it's actually a great strategy. If things didn't work out as a buyer's agent, that's what I was going to do. I was going to go back. I was going to get my ticket and go and build my own projects for exactly that reason.
I didn't know why you didn't stick at something you were good at.
Well, I'd never actually done it.
Yes,
I'm almost stumped today. I'm almost stumped. I'm about to throw my glass at you.
Okay.
But it's for once, you've delivered a great point. Even though you're a dickhead, you've delivered a great point. And no, it is. You got to remember, these are the things you're competing with. There's so many things you're competing with the development. You're competing with your neighbors. You're competing with builders. You're competing with competition out there trying to also secure those sites. You're in tight stock environments. You're competing with council. There's so many things right now. Also, like imagine if you've done a deal at the start of last year before interest rates started increasing and you didn't think interest rates going to rise for 2 years in 2024 and now you're up bloody 6% and you're getting smashed, like there's all these things that it's just extremely hard to forecast. And I think that's why I just wanted to jump in and unpack and dissect everything with this, just to give people a bit of an overview and a breakdown. Because I've had people reaching out to me lately going, is the time right to do it again now? And it's just, in my opinion, it's not. It's a time to keep building your portfolio the right way now.
Yeah.
What you want to build, like I was saying before, as a minimum, do those 3 style of deals I was talking about before. If you also can start building in the foundations of your portfolio and really building this thing out and getting it great, even building in a base of your portfolio. Maybe you want to get yourself 2 cash flow deals debt-free and a nice chunk of change before you go and do it. So you got a bit of backing behind you, or maybe get yourself to 100, 150K, build that out, use this as debt reduction at the back end. But when you got more experience around this developing, and whatnot as well. So that's how I would be looking at this, not just going, well, I'm going to start. I've just, or maybe I did okay in a little COVID mini boom and I made 150K. Oh, I'm an investor. I can develop.
Yeah.
It's a completely different game. And this is actually why I love the strategy that we harp on about at APS, because I know the power of the simple stuff. And so often, man, I've done developments and I've seen markets go so much past what I made 150 grand on a $550,000-$600,000 investment. And a lot of people would say that's good money. It's 20-25%. It's actually more than 25%. It's a great return on that front. But it's like, yeah, but if I'd put that 150 into 2 other markets, because it might have taken me 2 years to do the deal, that went up 50-60%, I could have made more money, not had the headache of doing the build and all the other bullshit that comes with it. Literally made more money. And in that time, I also probably could have re-leveraged multiple times and bought again and leveraged again and again. So that's why I like them as a back-end play when you have some experience and you're not looking to continue building the portfolio. You just want to start working on some debt reduction. I like them from that perspective. But when it comes to that, guys, if you didn't catch that as well, like just go back like a minute. I think you got to rewind like a minute and listen to what I said there, because I know I go quick sometimes when I get excited. But the money I have missed out on a lot of the time when I've been developing has been far superior what I could have made investing simply, but buying in the right property, the right price, in the right market, almost always outperforms, especially small developments that might take you out of the market for 18 to 24 months. Because even though you might make a nice margin on it, stretching that money further into correct markets that are going through a cycle and that you can make a margin on the way into will almost always outperform a small development. As much as I love them and I've made great money out of them, you almost will always make more money out of doing that intelligently than doing the deals.
I'll just say as well, it comes down to it's a safer option.
Yeah.
There's far less into it. Like if you're green to all of this stuff, if you've never done building before, you probably have no place just jumping straight into a development. Like, as I said, that's the crypto way of thinking, like fast money. It's riddled with risk, very hard, even in a good market, even with building cycles and everything in a normal amount. I've seen a lot of people lose money in developments where for varying reasons, they just haven't worked out. There's so many unknowns to it. And even for experienced developers, they get them wrong all the time. You might have had a really successful project and think, man, this is awesome, I'm going to go again, and then you lose everything. It's risky.
I'll say one thing on that. It's an amazing point to make. I don't know if you remember, Jimmy, I brought this up a while ago. I got two really good mates based in Sydney, very, very successful in their own right, even from an investing perspective, did really, really well. I think one of them had about 7-8 properties in Sydney, multiple grannies and stuff. Like portfolio was pumping. The other fella had about 4 or 5 himself as well. They were developing and they were doing well. and then they go, we're just going to go all in on this. They sold off all their stuff. They went and developed. They bit off a little bit more they could chew. COVID stuffed them a little bit. Lost everything. Had to start again from scratch. And they had multi-millions in net equity plus a lot of cash flow. That's where they went.
Bad timing with COVID, right?
Bad timing, but man, you never know what's around the corner. 2 years is a long time.
That's a good point.
That's the thing.
That's a good point.
It could have gone the other way, and they could be sitting on 10 mil now instead of the 2 mil maybe that they were on. And it could have gone the other way, but it's the risks associated with it.
That's the one thing I love about you. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah,
but
you're right.
You've always said from the start, when you build out your portfolio, people don't realize you're always looking at the downside, like in terms of mitigating your risk. So although you can make all this money, you should always be conservative in the sense of trying to reduce your debt, trying to keep the downside as manageable as possible.
The huge thing on that is if you invest longer, let's say you invest 5, 7, 10 years and you get extremely good at like what we do in this space, even just in terms of like building the portfolio, you're just trusting us and we're doing the process for you and we're building this thing out hectically, but you're understanding it. Yeah. You're understanding it. And then you get to the back end of your portfolio and you go, Sammy, mate, I know I've got to 150K passive. I've only got, 500, $800 million left of debt worth on the portfolio, but it's a 30% LVR on a $4 million portfolio. But mate, I want to do some debt reduction deals to pay off the back end of it. The way I would be doing it is like, because that's an amazing position, yeah? And that's the time that I think it would be great to do it. But at that point, you would have understood that, okay, well, I understand at least to an extent some things about developing and going down that route. I'm going to employ services to try and find either the right site, especially if we were doing it at the time. We don't do it right now. But let's say it was the right site in the right market because you need to get that point right. And then you're doing it, you're managing everything, a more flat market. A lot of experienced investors that I know, because I didn't understand this when I was younger, experienced developers, that I know, hate developing in markets that are frenetic, whether they're, even if they're having a crazy boom and they could have made heaps of money, or it's the other way and it's going the other way, or it's uncertain. Markets like we're in now, they hate developing in it because it's really hard to forecast what you can buy it for, what you can build it for, what your end sale price is. When a market's flat, it's really easy to determine all that. Again, should you develop in this market? Based on that scenario, no. And I remember when they told me that, I was like, what when you try and do it in like a hot market and when everything's going? It's because you can never perfectly time them.
It's a good point. It's a good point. Because it goes back to what you were saying. You don't forecast the gains you could be making on market move. Developers don't do that.
Yeah.
That's gravy at the end of the day. Like they're working out what they can make in the current market provided nothing else changed.
Yeah.
They know the low market's not going to dip any further. So they're confident with where the price is right now.
Yeah.
The market shifts up. It's more money in their back pocket. It's a bonus.
Yes.
But they were always going to make money off the deal as it stood.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was running into is the fact of know you're going to do it. And when you get to the back end of it and the market's flat, all right, no worries. Where's the next market that we think is going to have a run? Let's develop at this point at the bottom of the market. Let's develop. Can we make the numbers work? Yep. What's the upside? Well, the market's looking like it could, very soon go on a run. Perfect. You got a double whammy. That's great. But you're not in a super volatile, high build cost increase, highly volatile interest rate environment. You're not in all that stuff. And this is why the topic of this poddy is: should you develop in this market at this time?
The question that's ringing in my ears right now, and I've got one particular listener that is jumping out into my ears. He's actually got Anon Smith. Anon Smith is back.
Slapping.
And Anon Smith, I can just picture him driving his Datsun 120. He's driving down the freeway and he's thinking, Sammy, come on.
Blue chip? Is he developing blue chip?
No. What he's actually saying, and some of our listeners might be jumping, they might be about to hear some gold here because they're thinking, hold on, Sammy, you're saying do not develop in this market, but with your manufactured cash flow strategy, it is a mini development. You are building a granny or a duplex or something at the back. So they're saying, come on, Sammy, what are you saying that we should or shouldn't? What they're getting a little bit confused. And on Smith, he wants to know.
Anon Smith, did he text you? You wouldn't come up with a question like that.
Jimmy hasn't told you. He is Anon.
He is Anon. What a dog!
No, that's not me. I'm preempting the next Q&A.
You know what's coming.
Where Anon Smith,
Anon Takarezi, you can put your phone away. It's all good.
So just to get ahead of the curve.
It's a great point. Do you remember, your memory may not be good enough for half an hour ago.
Probably isn't.
Half an hour ago when I said the difference of what we have working with APS is we obviously we are a decent force when we're building in an area. We typically work with a small number. A lot of time it's only 1 or 2 builders in a particular area where we can control a lot more of the controllables and the outcome when it comes to that stuff as well. We can manage increases. A lot of the time, Liam, how often did you let people know a month before you knew increases were coming? Did you kind of just hit them when it, you were probably trying to save some comms and stuff that was going through, trying to get people to sign as a bit of a sales tactic? But how long did you normally give people as a a header before it was going to happen?
If they were already tendered signed, obviously they're covered within a tender period. If they hadn't signed on, obviously you're trying to tell them as preemptive as possible. But anyone that's in the construction, they're fixed for their tender period up until the tender expires. The nature is like, we don't often see that back end stuff. So once clients go through post construction, it gets handed to the team. We're not really communicating with those guys past the point. Yeah. But I will probably interject on what Jimmy was saying, even though
it was Anon Smith, by the way.
Sorry, Anon / aka Jimmy,
aka the double dog.
It's not me. It's Anon. Give
if
us
I
your
had
name.
2 hot dogs here, I'd slap you in the head with them both.
Sorry, Liam. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, like, Resi, granny flat builders are getting smashed at the moment because it's offering a different avenue for people. You know, it's dual income provisions on their backyards that they can very easily develop. There's less costs involved in it. Granny flats are easier in terms of infrastructure and all that stuff. Very easy to get started.
You can approve them a lot quicker.
You're not trying to sell them.
There's less variables. And granny flat builders are getting pummeled at the moment because of the demand, because of the yields that they provide. With and you've already got the property. It's very forecastable to see what you're making at the back end. So.
I know you're his mate, but don't help him out. I'm just trying to. Anon Smith.
That was an amazing point. He just quashed the double dog over here.
Anon Smith was trying to get him a bit hot under the collar.
You know what it is, but it's very true on that front as well. And I think we're like the one big thing. It's almost like when you work with our property managers as well. They're very like responsive to us because it's essentially almost like a massive portion of their rent roll. It's the same with the builders. We're with the guys that we work closely with. For one, there's like mutual respect both ways. But for two, they're very exposed to us pulling our business as well. We expect, like a lot of the time, they actually set up teams to work purely with us because it is a big arm and a big avenue of what we do. Literally, if we pull that business and go somewhere else, that is a lot of exposure for something they may have geared up for already in that sense. I know a lot of the builders we work with literally work in that way. They set up departments purely to handle like APS clients and whatnot with that. We get heads up. I know what Liam was kind of saying before. It's different with us. Like we get heads up a long way ahead. So it's like, we know this is coming probably the next 3 to 4 weeks, this next increase. We need to get this thing through, get it priced up, get it signed off on ASAP before that next base price increase comes through. Yeah. So sometimes it is unavoidable when this stuff comes through, but the one thing you got to remember, especially with and grannies are a lot quicker to build. Like I said before, when you're building brick on slab, pitched roof, all the rest of it, it is almost like a small home. So they do take a bit longer to build, especially some states are notorious for longer builds. But if you're building at today's dollars, what's the other big thing we got out of this? Build prices never come back, right? So if you're building at today's dollars and you're pushing these through and you're getting them out, if it's something you need in your portfolio now, if you're building now, like I even know from my personal portfolio, I built a couple of grannies last year, in the circa 170, went to build them again this year, around about the same time, about 12 months on. It was 20K up, it was 109. I was kicking myself because I just kind of put them on the back burner and didn't think about them. It was 20K up. Yeah. For me, it was 3 bills, it was $60,000 up. But I can't control that. Like I could have done them sooner. I had other things going through at the time. But it's part of the journey, it's part of the process with that as well. Realistically, in 12 months, it could be another 20 grand on top. Yeah. In a few years, it could be normal to look at builds of grannies at 200, 250, but it also could be normal that a Specky build is at 400, and so that's where in this scenario, if you've got the option, you've got the ability and you're doing it for cash flow that you're going to hold for the long term, especially like I'm building these things now. I could build them quicker. I could probably halve the time building lightweight where I'm building my brick ones. But I know, what am I now, 33, I'm probably going to own them for 100 years, another 100 years. I want this thing to last, Yeah. You've only got 20. Maybe you build prefab, I don't know.
Whatever's going to get it up quicker.
We'll get you there to 10, 20 years. That's all you got left, right? But for me, I need to think a longer term.
You do.
So
just on and I will say, like with the granny flats as well, it's all based on the cash flow, right? Yeah. You forecast the exact percentage, what everyone's going to be able to make from it. It's not about profit. We're not trying to make 100, 200K off building the granny flat. It's chasing the cash flow.
That's
which
a
is
great
different.
point,
Yeah.
mate. That is a great point. That's why I've got you on instead of Jimmy. That's why next week you're the host.
Well, you are the expert in this space.
That actually is a
right.
great point.
It is. You're keeping them forever. You're keeping them forever.
That's it. It's not so much about a profit at the back end. I mean, obviously we're moving to we're always wanting to make money on deals like that as well. But it is about that long term cash flow that we're holding as well.
All right. Well, that was awesome. I think we've pretty much covered everything. Is there anything else that we need to cover off, Liam?
Liam, any final points you want to make, mate?
Look, obviously it's knowing what you're getting into, right? You got to, if you do decide that now's still the right time and you want to double down this, it's all about due diligence at this stage. You can't get lazy with it. You can't get compliant with it. You've really got to do the nth degree of due diligence work in this current market. As I said, go based on what you know, not what you're forecasting. Make sure you're building a good team around you. Make sure you're getting the feasibilities done to crunch all the numbers. Make sure that everything stacks. That's all you can do, really.
100%.
Apply your own due diligence. Do it to the nth degree. Outside of that, that's the best you can do.
Can I say something? Sorry, Sammy. That with that, and we talk about this a lot on different episodes, but the self-awareness piece, and even just listening to you, like us talking about this topic today, for me, I'm just thinking in my own head, this is way too much bloody work. And I don't trust myself to be able to do every single one of those steps. It just seems so complex. So not saying it's impossible, but as you hit it on the head, make sure you know exactly any little bit that you just think, oh, don't worry about it, it'll be right, it can come and bite you on the ass.
100%. There are things you've got to factor into developing. You know, there's so many. As we tell back to, like, start with your easy stuff. Get some runs on the board. Build some confidence. If you haven't invested in general, invest in the easy stuff. Invest in the stuff you can control.
I've spoken multiple times about levels of investor. You don't start out. There's no level for you. You're that low. You're that low.
Here he goes. Buckle up, people. Buckle up.
There's different levels, and you got to understand that, and that's why I talk about doing. Do your bread and butters. Do a reno plus granny. Maybe do 2 reno plus grannies. Maybe do multiples. Of that style of steel, that style of deal. It will help you level up. It will help harden your skin. I've seen a lot of people that start out even with things like a house and land, and it drags out so long, or a duplex they bought through some, or a little dual lock thing they bought through someone, and it drags out so long. There's so many headaches with it that it's just like, I never want to invest again. It was a shit product in the first place, and they never want to invest again. Cut your teeth on the stuff that's very manageable and edible and like at your level. Get past that and move up in stages. Don't try and be a level 1 investor, jump into a level 20 deal. Be careful with it. Be realistic with it on that front. When I believe the time is right to develop again, we'll get you boys back, or maybe just you, Liam. We'll have a good chat about building your team and about going through the actual. You talk a lot about due diligence. We dissected a lot of it here, just it's for you guys who know, because a lot of people go, well, what's due diligence then? Due diligence is like your FISOs, understanding your risks and really having everything on board, being completely aware of everything. And what we'll do is when I believe it's the right time to kind of jump back in and start looking at those style of projects again, when things have calmed back down, market's flat like we spoke about, that's when we'll dive in and we'll go a good run through of what people should be looking for, for their team. Because I know you were like, oh mate, let's run through everything on the team. I was like, hold your horses. Fucking don't even want people doing this at the moment, So
I guess
this is your forte, man. Like this is where you're extremely experienced in.
And look, I love building. I love developing and everything. Like, I think it's a good merit and a good investment. But like you were saying, there are different levels. If you're going to go to development, start with the simple stuff first. Maybe you do a granny flat on your established build, then you double with a house and land. Then maybe after you've got some confidence and you have a liking for it, you then look at doing a duplex. They do start getting more complex, and you do need to start building that knowledge.
But also understanding that the more complex deals doesn't mean it's more profitable, right?
No,
and I remember one person, I can't remember where I read it or listened to someone talking about property, and he said something that I'll never forget. And he goes, you want to make the most amount of money with the least amount of effort. And in my mind, right at that time, I was like, that's just so counterintuitive to anything you do in life.
100%.
And it wasn't until we started doing some work together and I started realizing there's so much easier money to be made by doing this than going through all the stuff around.
You know what one of my favorite sayings is? I think I said it. Is you want to pick up as many properties as you can in a cycle before it takes off. I guarantee you will make more money out of doing that than pretty much any development.
Yes.
If you position yourself heavily in a market, there's a reason why when COVID happened, I knew Brizzy was going to take off. I went and bought like 10, 11, 12 properties up there.
Yes.
It all doubled in about 2 years. Same thing of multiple other locations. Same thing happens. You load up in that. How many developments could you go and do and make 3 mil in 2 years?
Yeah, that's
literally
insane.
You know?
And
Well, you're not getting
doing
cash
too much
flow,
work.
You're not getting all that stuff.
Exactly.
From it. You're holding your money in an asset that's not really going to do anything
100%.
for a period. But also the other thing is as well, and the big thing, like going to what we do at APS, it's safety. You know, like it's sticking to the easy stuff that's not risky.
Yeah.
You know, it's simple, it's easy. You've done it, I don't know how many hundreds of times to everyone. It's repeatable. Like go with the safety stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like it's the best way to start building is
It's a great point, man. Self-reflect, understand the level of investor you are, cut your teeth on the stuff that you can learn on, you know, and even maybe you've been investing for a couple of years, but maybe you're not super proficient. Get proficient at things first and cut your teeth and push yourself a little bit on these deals.
You know what? I don't think I'll ever do townhouses at the moment. Anyway, I just don't see the merit in it. Even if I think about it, I'm like, the strategy that we're doing now, it just makes so much more sense. Why the hell am I going to do two years tying up to do what?
Do you remember? Okay, so many people will do like a 4 or 5. Just we're going to wrap up in a second, guys. I've been going for a while here, but so many people will do like a townie development. They'll aim to make like 80, 100 grand per townhouse. They'll do 4. They make 400 grand, right?
That's in the best case.
That's best case, right? And that's with nothing going wrong. That's like an initial FISO on something like that. Yeah, that's me using throwaway numbers. Man, you just look at that deal that we bought. That when you said I don't want to do bread and butter, I just want to keep doing cash flows, and we did one bread and butter, and that was what 12, 18 months ago.
Yeah.
And you're up 150 grand in 12 to 18 months off a deal you don't even think about.
No.
In 12 to 18 months. The dude doing the townhouse hasn't even started building yet. And you've made half of that with a standard deal literally just sitting there. Imagine you buy 2 or 3 of those. You're literally in front of him and you're not even thinking about it. You're sitting there sitting.
Positively geared too.
Exactly.
So it's not no holding costs. It's not hurting me at all.
100%, man. No, it's
and that's stressful. It's stressful going through that path and doing all of the stuff. Like you'd be ripping your hair out trying to do one of those. And the other thing is as well,
yeah, sorry, go, man.
I was just going to say, like, with the capital gains and everything as well.
Exactly what I was about to say. Your tax break doing developments is so much lower than as a mum and dad investor going and buying a property properly and literally being able to write 50% of it off. I was literally just about to say that. That's awesome.
I wanted to end with that one because I'm like, you know, like if you had to sell a couple just for cash flow purposes, you maybe can't afford to hold the number you wanted to. You have to sell one. You don't get any exemption off that if you happen to flip it straight off the bat.
Yeah.
So that chews into part of your profit that you otherwise could
100%.
have had. So, yeah,
100%.
All right,
Beautiful. Guys,
where are we developing?
I love it. I think we're good. I think you're developing.
Jimmy is going to develop some property down at Mordor.
Let us know
Couple of caves.
I think the market's pretty well dipped in there. At the moment, so
pretty much. I've owned the land for thousands of years.
All right, boys. Thanks very much for jumping on. Liam, appreciate your insights, mate. Jimmy, appreciate the humor that we got out of ripping
Thank you.
So, mate,
Thank you
great having
much.
you on as usual. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you took some great value out of it, as always, please send it to someone else that you think might take some good value out of this episode and maybe needs to hear it. Maybe they're looking at developing. Maybe they're a massive advocate of developing instead of just the simple, buy and holds and timing markets correctly and going down this path. Or maybe there's someone that's been burnt by it and we're trying to do it again or whatever. Maybe they're assessing their own property and looking at it. Maybe they need to run their numbers perfectly from a FISO perspective like we've run through today. Anyone you think that could take some value out of this episode, please send it on. If you enjoyed the episode, please jump on to your favorite listening platform if you haven't done it yet and leave us a nice 5-star review. If you want to hear Liam on the show a bit more, send us a message and let us know. If you want to have Jimmy on the show less, please message on and let us know. Please really do let us know. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Thanks, boys, once again for joining me. And until next time, guys, it's another Scouting Australia podcast.